interesting. We have Seventh-day Adventists, Pentecostals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Mormons. Absolutely the most guilty, guilt-ridden group of all of them that we've taught. These look a heck of a lot like cults, don't they? Yeah. Well, there's a clear jump from here to here. Now, a lot of people, when I say, tell me who you think the most guilty are, guilt-ridden religions, they will almost always guess Catholic, number one. And we got a lot, but the Mormons have just learned how to do guilt much better than the Catholics have. And I think we've got a lot of light Catholics these days. They don't, Catholics aren't having sex anymore because they're not having children anymore. You notice how many Catholics used to have lots of kids, they aren't anymore, so they must not be having sex. Am I correct? Well, maybe they're using birth control. Pope shouldn't want to know about that. You might know the fastest growing religions seem to correspond with the most guilt-ridden religions. Isn't that interesting? Guilt is such a great tool that most of the major religions have learned how to use it. And it's not just guilt around food, like some religions where it's now guilt around sex. That started about 2,500 years ago. Sex became the venue by which you could infect people. We then took our data and we split the data in some interesting ways. Here we got 14,000 people telling us all sorts of stuff. And we said, well, if you said your home was very religious, a scale of an 8, 9, or a 10, then we put you in one group. And then we asked, was your home pretty much secular or non-religious or Unitarian, for example, 1, 2, or 3. And we took those two groups and we compared them, because that tells us what the ultimate effect of religion is, helps us understand the difference here. And we've got graphs that look like this. When religious, were you guilty about a specific activity or desire? Interesting results here. We see that the least religious, those who scored themselves 1, 2, or 3, said no. 73, and they said yes 26% of the time. So least religious just have never been that guilty, whereas the most religious were very guilty. So we've got evidence right now that the religion you were raised in caused the guilt, or is very closely associated with guilt. And that's going to help us understand some interesting things later about actual behavior. Does religion actually prevent or stop sexual behavior? Now you would think how many millions, your tax dollars, have been spent on abstinence-only programs? I think it's somewhere around the neighborhood of about $500 million, $500 million or more have gone to teaching children to just say no to sex. Did it work? Well, if you look at the ERIS survey and the Pew survey and the abstinence-only research, millions of dollars have been spent on research around does it work or not. The evidence says it doesn't. It says to not work at all. So what did our research show? And this is important because if you're doing social science research, you don't want to just your research, if you're asking similar questions, should look similar to other researchers. I mean, if you're way out in some other way, maybe something wrong with your questions or something wrong with the way you did your survey. So it was very important for us to see, did our survey show the same thing as others did? And look at this. Masturbation. When at 15 years old, religious children and non-religious children, isn't this is almost no difference? Well, when you come over to the religious people at 18 and non-religious people at 18, you see there is a little bit of difference here. 4 to 9 points down here at the bottom, you can see. So there's some difference at age 18. But you can look back, before there was almost no difference in when they started masturbating or petting or oral sex or intercourse. And look at that, we did have people having intercourse at 15 in our survey, some of which said it was with their ministers or their minister's son or daughter. That was kind of interesting, wasn't it, when we got that? But 21 years old, it doesn't matter how religiously you were raised, you're screwing people just like those atheists are. There's no difference. There's very little difference at the age of 18. This is when the millions of dollars are being spent to teach kids not to have sex. And the research shows it seems to delay the onset of actual sexual behavior by 3, 4, or 5 months, depending upon the study you look at. But when they do start having sex, they don't use condoms. They don't use birth control. Isn't that interesting? But the atheists, as you'll see in the report, are much more informed about sex and sexuality, or the secularists, or at least the children that are raised in highly secular homes. So what about pornography? Something like 90% of all men use pornography, and around 76% of all women use pornography. There's an interesting survey that just came out this week that correlated the sites that women who are subscribed to the Christian Women's website, and it's a very conservative website. 40% of all women who subscribe to that website visit porn sites on a regular basis. Now we can tell that, with the new Google technology. We don't know who it is, but we can tell. Membership here, 40% of women are using porn over here. Isn't that interesting? Well, let's see what the secularists do here, what we found out here. Here's the least religious group. We split them up, and here's the least religious group. Boy, you guys slept awfully late. They were partying until 2 o'clock with me, and I made it here. Okay, who do you talk to? Where did you get your sex education or your information about sexuality? Here's kids who were raised in the least religious environments. Personal experience, 42% said they went out and actually screwed somebody, or did something that was sexual, actually, with somebody. That's where they got their education. Next is parents. 38% of these kids raised in less religious homes said they got their sex education. They could choose up to 3, so if these add up to more than 100%, they could choose up to 3. So 38%, that is not something to write home about. And that leaves a whole lot of 68% of parents who aren't talking, even if they are secular. So that doesn't sound too good, 38%. And then less pornography. That's number 4 of our least religious people is getting their information from pornography. Now, how about the most religious people in our survey? Our most religious people, oh, by the way, going back here, this 75% is friends and peers. Both sides said friends and peers were the key, the most. But, so we can just kind of discount that. 75% and 70% here. So where did our really religious kids go? First of all, personal experience, 50%. They are 8% higher in experience. In other words, religious kids are going out and screwing somebody. Haven't they been taught all their life that is wrong, that is sinful, you're going to hell? And yet they do it anyway. And what's the second one? How about pornography? Where was it in the other list? In the 20s. And look here, it's 33%. The religious people are using pornography for their sex education more than the non-religious people. This is absolutely astounding to me, because they have been taught. How many of you were taught that pornography will send you to hell? Okay, only about half of you? Come on. You must have been not going to the church I went to. And look at this. Religious kids said 13% they got their education from parents. In the previous, it was 38%. In other words, non-religious parents are doing a better job by almost over three times than the religious parents are. Think about this. The religious people, the religious right, are saying parents should have final say, and schools shouldn't be doing sex education, and churches should be doing sex education. And what we see here is nobody's doing sex education for these kids. The secular parents are doing it for their kids, but still nothing to write home about. And these guys, these poor kids, are getting nothing in their sex education. So that deals, we'll come back and look a little bit more at that. But now that you're our next question was, now that you're non-religious, how has your sex life changed? A 1, much worse. A 10, much better. And here's what the results we got. I just think this is amazing. 54% said their sex life improved to an 8, 9, or a 10 after they left religion. 2.2% of our sample said it got worse by a long shot. So Amanda and I got in there, and we had places for comments, and we looked at their comments. And the comments were things like, I used to be able to lay every girl in the Sunday school class, and now I can't get him to go to bed with me. Now when I tell him I'm an atheist. Or I told my wife I was an atheist, and she hadn't been back to bed with me since. So there's real consequences in your relationships and your availability of sex partners. And it wasn't just males, we saw it on the female side, but about 75% of our sample was males, because males seem to dominate in the atheist community and the secular community more than females in a lot of groups and a lot of organizations. So, wow, huge difference. Might indicate something about the impact that religion's having on your sexual satisfaction. So, now we want to know which religion's really nailing it the worst. So we looked at how has your sex life improved since you left religion by denomination. Isn't this cool? We can look at which denominations are actually having, when you leave them, how much your sex life actually improves. And we see that if you're a Jehovah's Witness, your sex life goes off the charts once you leave Jehovah's Witnesses. Mormons, same thing. But remember, in our earlier survey, we showed you that the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses were among the highest in guilt. So the higher the guilt, the less satisfied you are. When you leave, the more your satisfaction goes up. Seventh-day Adventists. Now, these folks were really, really strong, as well as the Pentecostals. So those are the top four. If you leave those groups, you're going to see a really big improvement in your sexual satisfaction. Isn't that, and we got a lot more. The Baptists are right at their top. Church of Christ are pretty high too. But, you know, there's those Unitarians again. If you leave the Unitarians, it doesn't help, guys. So stick with the Unitarian Church. You're not going to get any benefit from leaving there. All right. Just want to keep them happy there. We do have to be a little careful in the interpretation of some of the other groups because our sample size was fairly small. But we did include them if we got 20 or more. And so we have some Buddhists there. Not sure if that data is really that reliable, but you know, we got 20 more, so we put it in there. So what is normal among secularists? Because our normal behavior doesn't look like normal human behavior. Because quite frankly, Baptist behavior and sexuality, at least their self-reported behavior, looks pretty abnormal. When you ask a group of Baptists, do you masturbate, and nobody raises their hands, that is just abnormal. You are a freak. All of the Baptists that don't raise their hands are lying. I studied with the great psychotherapist Albert Ellis back in the late 70s. And Albert Ellis had a famous saying. He said, 97% of males will admit to masturbating, and 3% are lying. It's somewhat similar to women. Now, women's masturbatory behavior is lower than men. It's still pretty darn high. So any group that you don't get any hands up, there's a whole lot of liars in that group. So, sexual entertainment. What is the sexual entertainment that women tend to use? Well, the first thing they like is erotic novels. Is anybody surprised? No surprises here. And 49% of the women, they can choose up to 3 in our survey, 49% said they liked erotic novels. And I mean, these are explicit erotic novels, not just your Harlequin stuff, although some of that's pretty hot. And then the next thing was videos with a plot. There's got to be a plot to them. On down here, you just get regular pictures, and then you get the internet shorts, 5 minutes, just people in naked bodies doing all sorts of things. All right, so that's what women like as sexual entertainment. And we found that over 76%, or about 76% of women say they use porn. Period. It's a very common thing. It's not nearly 100%, but it's a very high percentage of our sample. Now, you might think, well, secularists, they're just a bunch of perverts. So they're using porn too much. But do you know where the highest porn use in the United States is? Give me a guess. You guys can't say. Huh?